Hi. My name, again, is Michael Sullivan, and I teach advanced placement psych in Hopkinton, Mass., not far from here. And maybe you'll agree with me that I feel like I could go home now and I would already have benefited from this workshop, just from meeting so many of you. But maybe only teachers like us can appreciate the introduction period going around and just sharing our enthusiasm for this. It's also hard to decide what to do in the very tight time frames that we'll have for this, because you don't quite know what people have done before, or what they do, or how many workshops they've gone through, and so on. And we're going to start with the scientific inquiry domain, which kind of makes sense, I think, and it matches up with our keynote address today. But with that in mind, I just decided to do what I do the first 2 minutes of my first class. And you might have done things like this or seen things like this, and if you have, I'd love to hear your versions of it. And right now, just play dumb and play along, okay? So actually what I'd like, could you go get those copies for me, Craig? Yeah, thank you. We'll have copies for you later, but thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Craig. What I need is a volunteer, someone willing to help me with a little activity. Peter, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a telephone book and a ruler, okay? And I'm sorry? You can sit right down, yeah. And let's just, to make it simple, let's rely on the white pages of the book. The yellow pages have so many ads and things like that. So turn to the white pages if you would. And I don't know, there's probably like 200 pages in there, but Jill, could you just give us a number between 1 and 150? 112. Could you turn to page 112 in the white pages of that phone book, please? Thank you. And I think there are three columns in the phone book? Yes. Beth, could you give us a number 1 to 3? 1. Go to the first column on page, what page, 112? Yeah, of the white pages. And Jerry, would you give us a number between, I don't know, 1 and 15? 8. Peter, would you count down, use the phone numbers, not the names. Count down to the 8th phone number in the first column on page 112. And once you do that, could you put the, I'm sorry? Yes, 8th phone number down, right. Could you put the ruler underneath that entry just so you can kind of keep it focused? Very good. And maybe show it to Aaron just so you can kind of confirm that's what it is. Aaron is confirming that. Good. And now, what I would like you to do is focus on that entry. Focus on the name and the phone number, if you would. Everyone else, if you would, please clear your mind, because it hurts. There's a lot of interference otherwise. Sorry. So focus on that. And I'm going to try my best to see if I can get it. And then in a moment, I'm going to ask for another volunteer to do something. Again, some of you might have seen this before. But if you are now on page 112, in the first column of that phone book on the 8th item down, I'm having a little trouble getting it right now. So perhaps it's that you're not thinking clearly enough. So I'm going to come back to you in a moment. Let me do something else while I'm waiting and see if I can get it. I'm going to do another. Please keep that right there if you would, Peter. I want to do one more thing too. Carrie, would you help me with this?
Sure.
Yeah, you can stay right there. Okay. Peter, please keep focusing on it. Oh, thanks very much.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Carrie, would you help me? In a moment, I'm going to hold up a newspaper article. It's about welfare waivers and so on. And I'm just going to run this up and down the newspaper article, okay? Whenever you want me to stop, tell me to stop, and I'll stop where you want me to stop, okay? And then I'm going to cut it, and so you don't think I'm messing around with it, I'm not going to touch it. Would you please come up and pick it up, okay? So don't cut off my fingers, but otherwise you can do anything you want. I'll stop whenever you want me to stop.
Stop.
Am I stopping where you want me to?
Yes.
Lily, am I stopping where she wants me to stop? Okay, good. I'm going to cut. It's not cutting very well. And Kerry, would you please come up and take that back to your seat And there was a little ad and an article on the back, but could you take that back to your seat, please? And would you please read, still having interference from Peter right now, but I'm going to come back to that. Would you please read the first line or so where you had me cut the newspaper article?
To seek major changes in how they meet welfare to work requirements for some of their poorest residents.
That's about what it says there, yes. Could I ask, Jay, would you mind, could you go to the back of the room, and on the back wall of the room there's an envelope taped to the back wall of the room? It's right there, yes. Could you take that off the wall, please, bring it back to your seat? And would you confirm, Jay, that that is indeed a sealed envelope?
It is.
Yes. And what does it say on the front of that envelope?
It says, prediction, Clark APA Psych Workshop, Monday morning, July 16th, 2012.
Very good. And would you open that envelope, please? And inside there's a piece of paper. Is there not? Don't open it up yet, please. Kerry, would you read again where you had me cut the newspaper article?
It says,
No, don't get, Kerry, please, could you read that? Yeah.
To seek major changes in how they meet welfare to work requirements for some of their poorest residents.
And Jay, could you please read what was sealed in that envelope?
to seek major changes in how they meet welfare to work requirements for some of their poorest residents, and leading conservatives are crying foul.
Oh, that last line. Is that last line?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, okay, good. A lot of people get impressed by that, but some of you may have these abilities too. You're not very impressed, so let me try to get Peter's if I can. I really blame, I think it's New York, that sometimes when you get people from New York, they don't do very well with this stuff. So I know exactly how many people are from New York here, so I know there's no critical mass yet. Anyway, Peter, if you'd go back to your item, would you please focus again on that entry? I'm getting very clearly the address, 252 Pond Street in Ashland, 508-881-4867.
Correct.
Is that correct? Aaron, would you confirm that is indeed correct? God, thank you, Aaron. Confirmation approved. Yes, sure. Actually, sometimes kids do applaud. Some of you have done things like this before. And one year, then I revealed what you already know, why I do this. And kids react. One, also, I think it's very important to do this, if you can do it, is to learn people's names. It's very hard to do when, as probably all of you have, 5 classes, 25 to 30 kids, that's maybe 150 kids. But I do spend time, and you can practice using name mnemonics to do this, to learn people's names. And that just completely weirds kids out, that you know all of their names the first day, and then you're doing psychic demonstrations. Usually we were just very pressed for time, so I didn't do the kind of setup that I would have done before. But the point, of course, is to ask them, how impressed are you? And usually they're pretty impressed, probably more impressed than you are, because a lot of you have done things like this before. And then I usually reveal to them I do not have ESP, and in fact I'm very skeptical about any claims of ESP. And they often fight that. They're like, yeah, yes you do. Like, no, really, you just don't have that. But they want to believe that you do. And then, of course, the point of these sorts of things, and many of you do this sort of thing, is the debriefing. How could you test whether someone could actually do these sorts of things? And for me, when you do 5 or 8 minutes of those 2 demonstrations, and then reveal I don't really have ESP, how could we test it? And ask them to hypothesize, and then they start to hypothesize about how it might have been done and how could we test whether it can really be done, and how do we control variables in conducting such a study. And then I may write a couple of things just to remind, but I'm sure you do these things a lot. Usually right after that, you can follow up quickly with the story that I'm sure most of you know of Clever Hans, the horse who allegedly could count and read and so on in the turn of the 20th century. You have to say that now. I used to say turn of the century, but that doesn't work anymore. And from that, you can introduce the idea of a double-blind procedure, of course, and also just the whole idea of controlling for variables in an experiment and controlling conditions in an experiment. And that segue is pretty easy. Then we usually go to a drug study just because it's so clean and clear that you could have a 2 or 3 group drug study and introduce a placebo group into that. And we often use a very humorous example. Well, I don't know if it's very humorous, but I think it's humorous. Made up story of a study and to try to get at the variables of IV, DV, confounding variables, and so on. Also, I have a handout, and Craig brought them in a second ago, with one approach that we do, and I'll give them out later, where we use social psychology examples. Partly because early in my teaching career, I found, maybe like you, if you're teaching a class and you're following a sort of typical progression, you'll go from methodology at the beginning and try to get to social psych at the end, and then social psych you don't get to at the end, and you say, read the chapter, good luck to you. And so we do almost always in our first methodology course, methodology unit, we rely on social psych examples. So you can float a lot of different concepts in social psych. It gives a sort of symmetry to the class. You can also simultaneously be floating concepts like confirmation bias, which comes up in several later units, and belief perseverance, because once kids think that you have ESP, they look to confirm that you do. And even when I'm sure you've encountered this too, you say, I do not have ESP, people have actually argued with me on that. At one point, I remember in a class, I called on someone and I said, Emily, what do you think? How do you think we did this? And some kid in the back said, how do you know our names? And a kid next to him said, he's got ESP, you moron. Like, haven't you been paying attention? Like, so they were pretty convinced. Also, and many of you know this, I suspect, one of the activities we just did, the reason you can get away with it is because of perceptual set or perceptual expectancy. So I suspect many of you have seen at least one of those before. And if you haven't, though, choose one of them, either the newspaper article or the phone book. How did I do it? Let's go the phone book. The phone book didn't go that great, actually, but go ahead. I've had it go worse, but and I'm usually better.
His choice of page.
That would be impressive if I could do that from here. Yeah. How did I do that? Anyone else who doesn't know it want to hypothesize? Go ahead. Peter's in on it with me. So often, I'm sure you use this term a lot. I love using this term the first day because then kids want to be one the rest of the year. Then no, competitors are like, so we're not doing this isn't history. You're like, no, people are in on it with me, and then suddenly they internalize that word very quickly because they want to do it. So Peter's my Confederate. Peter, are you my Confederate? No. Of course, that's exactly what he would say if he was my Confederate, but he is not my Confederate. Yeah. We spoke last night briefly, but that's it, yeah. Maybe he's not my Confederate, though. Who else could be a Confederate?
I thought there was the answer. He was your Confederate.
No, he isn't.
Okay, I got it.
Aaron is the Confederate. I actually know Aaron. By the way, I feel like I should say this since we just called on Aaron. Along with a colleague of mine at Hopkinton, we have an AP Psych test prep book and teacher's manual. And Aaron was one of the people who read it. He's one of the editors too. So, and he's going to say things like, yeah. But he read it and said, this part's stupid. Anyway, he was not my Confederate either, although he could have been and it might have worked. In fact, I do have a Confederate, though, for the phone book demonstration. I'm sorry? Beth, go. Good. Did I spoke to 3 people before and said, when I say at random come up with a number between 1 and 1/5? No, I spoke to Jill and said, say 112. And then column, wasn't it you who chose column 1? I know I didn't, which destroys your argument. And then,
Forgot that there was a, once again. Erase that part you just wrote.
that makes sense, good. Okay, quickly. I have a write-up, by the way, if you want to do this. I think a lot of you have probably seen, because some people do this, the newspaper article. How many of you have seen the newspaper article before? Yeah, a few of you. I think both of them are so good, though, for a naive audience, that then you can do other bad ones, which I do. I usually do 2 or 3. And it doesn't take long. It seems like just a waste of class time. But it isn't, because none of them take long. The phone book one took a little longer today than it usually takes, actually, for reasons I'll tell you about in a second. But it doesn't take long. It engages them, obviously, in class. But you can keep referring back to it when you're talking about methodology. And even if you're not getting the terms yet, because you'll get the terms when you go to your social psych examples and say, you can see the write-up that I did about social psych examples, and you're identifying the null hypothesis and the IV and the DV and so on. But you can get all of that partly because they're engaged, but partly because you're building it from critically thinking about something like that. So, one more guess. Who's my Confederate in the phone book demonstration? Kerry is my Confederate in the newspaper, but so she knew where I was going to cut. How would you know? Yeah. But she would deny that, wouldn't she? Yeah. Actually, my Confederate in the phone book actually made me panic a little bit. Mr. Gruber was my Confederate. He went, could you go get these files? We already had these made. And you will not believe what you can get away with that demonstration, because I've done it with the person in the room. Craig also had that same phone book and a ruler, and he was right out in the hallway. And he went to page 112, first column, 8th phone number down. And then he was going to come back with my copies. I don't know why he was waiting so long for that. Yeah, selling. Well, I'm dying up here. And it's great because sometimes, so on top of the folder he wrote the entry, although he only wrote, you're supposed to write the person too, but you didn't do that, so I had to blame it on him. Anyway, yeah. So sometimes you start talking, and then I've already read it, but then I'm doing something else, and then I forget what it is. And I'm like, okay, I forget what it is. But then you can go, nobody ever notices. Just going like, okay, I'm trying to read it, and it's right there, which helped a lot because I was a little panicky there. That's why I've never done it where it went so badly and then I had to go to the newspaper article on the spot. So thank you. You kind of bailed me out. I have a bunch of others if you want to know them. They're all just magic trick books, things, and so on. But I think this concept is key. Because once they think you have, one, they've heard about the class. It sounds like for a lot of you, so popular, they've heard about the class. They think it's going to be fun. And they're coming in thinking, he can read my mind, someone said before. Yeah. And once you've shown them one thing, they're like, well, you do. And they're going to keep believing that. And they're going to keep looking for evidence that you can do it. The newspaper article, as you know, is also really based in part on this. The concept of perceptual set. Because you're a teacher audience, I wasn't feeling that bold, but you'll hear more about this because I'm almost out of time right now, so I'm going to stop shortly. Could someone maybe explain how you do this? Kirk, you know it.
Yeah,
Remember? Sure, go ahead. Well, one of the things I will say is I'll ask kids, can I replicate, do you think I could do that again? So you can float the term replication. And they're like, yeah. I'd be like, yeah, I could kind of. But what if I said, hey, Kirk, go to the library, get a newspaper article, you cut out the article, you bring it back, we'll do it again. While you're gone, I'm going to write my prediction. Do you think I could do it then? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I couldn't do it then. Why not?
You cut out the article ahead of time and you make the cut beforehand, kind of like the look in that first one, and then you turn it upside down and take it back together. So that wherever you cut, once you pick it up, you get to the next one and read the right side. You can read the right side out. And so that's the top line.
Now, some of you who haven't seen it before might be confused by that. It's hard to picture. I did write it up. But also and sometimes when you're feeling bold, you can do this. With kids especially, I'll say, Kay, could you confirm that is a newspaper article, please? And people, she'll look and go, yeah, that's a newspaper article already, except
It's upside down.
almost all of it is upside down. But because of perceptual set and kind of minimum tendency and perception, people don't detect that. If you're feeling bold, you can actually test it and pass it around, and people will look and say, yep, that looks fine to me, even though almost all of it is upside down. Just the very top isn't. Then you just write the bottom line here in the envelope. Wherever she has me cut, she's going to pick it up like that and read that line. That's the one you put in the envelope. Now, if you're still having trouble picturing that, it's easy to explain later. It's foolproof. Yeah. First day especially. It's foolproof partly because it doesn't require a Confederate. But also, before I turn things back over to Debbie, another demonstration has been going on in this class for a little while. Have you caught on to it yet? Oh, no, yeah. Little demonstration of another methodological approach. And I have a handout about that and how you could set it up. And I also have a handout about longitudinal approach. So I'll just say quickly and then I'll turn it over to Deb. You may know in personality theory much later in the course, if you kind of follow a relatively typical progression, or in the individual variations domain, if you use the standards, you'll study trait theories, type theories, like the five-factor model, the big five. So one way, I think, to introduce longitudinal research and survey methodology to an extent is to give kids a little inventory that I just made up on the 5 elements of the five-factor model and ask them to rate themselves. And sometimes I'll collect them and have a code name, not their name, but I'll give them back to them. Because then when we go to personality theory months later, I'm going to give them the same survey again. They take it again, and we just usually eyeball whether there's a correlation between their scores. It gets at a lot of good stuff about survey methodology and about the concept of longitudinal research, and you're using their own stuff, their own sense of themselves to do it. Sometimes I'll do a version of that where I'll have that I make it two-sided and they rate themselves on the 5 components of the big 5 and then give it to a peer just sitting next to them who rates them, which is often just hilarious. And they compare their own judgment of themselves and their best friend's judgment, or someone who doesn't know them. So that's 2 different ways you can use a real simple survey. I'm sure we all give a million surveys, but you can be sliding in references in the first day of class, first hour, 3 different methodological approaches: an experiment, how do you control experimental conditions, longitudinal research, and naturalistic observation. Because I have 2 other Confederates in this room who have been conducting a naturalistic observation on you, looking for instances of bored or disinterested behavior. And who are they? Emily just volunteered. No. Emily and Julie actually are, and just conveniently, they're kind of in different spots of the room. And usually in class, you can then ask, it's fun to follow up, and we just don't have time, to ask them, so what did you notice? And that's hilarious. But also, what's the key? Do they agree? Usually not. And you can get at confounding variables, you can get at operational definitions, because I intentionally, as I told you, you were both so nice. I thought you were great at it too, because I didn't notice you were doing it. Did you do it? You were doing it.
I was trying to listen to you and do it.
The kids, though, are always terrifically unobtrusive. Nobody knows. And then some kid will say, well, you were taking a lot of notes for like the first, but they didn't really think anything of it. But I gave intentionally no directions. There was no tally sheet. There was no operational definition of board with no measurable specific definition. But in the context of the usually fun discussion about what you noticed, that Lily was yawning and that Simone almost fell back in her chair, and then Emily was staring off into space out the window for a while. It's like, well, is that boredom or is that intense engagement and reflection. And it really is a great introduction. Again, if you're doing it all on the first day, I'm just doing a really fast version of it now. Certainly in an hour class, I don't know what your schedules are like, but in an hour class, you can float the ideas of experimental methodology, naturalistic observation, longitudinal studies, and this very important concept of having operational definitions, controlling experimental design, and so on. So if you're interested, I know you have a big binder full of stuff, so you may not want to just, you may know these things and not want to do them and so on, but if you want to take a copy of my 4 write-ups of these things, I'll lay them out here and at the break. Maybe you can do that, okay? Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Emily, and thank you, Julie. And I turn you over to Deb Park.
What I did was, when we thought about presenting, and we talked about doing activities with you, demonstrating some of them, as well as discussing different ways that you can integrate the activities in your classroom, we both came up with ideas that we hope will go across the many different topics that you will be teaching. Before you begin writing and trying to copy everything down, as I know you will, you don't have to. All right? Many of the materials relating to my presentations, our presentations, some of those materials are in your binder. These materials, if they're not in your binder, I will provide to you. The PowerPoints, the documents that I'm referring to, in one of 2 ways. I can always just email them to you, but I also have a wiki. And I would like to make a page on the wiki just for Clark. And I will put all kinds of resources on the wiki, anything you want, including everything I use over the next couple days. Anything you might want to share, we can put on there, including pictures, etc. So you don't have to be worried about copying all these things down. And plus, for me to make a handout like this, you would have to be worried about typing these addresses into the computer correctly, where if you have it electronically, you can just click on it, open it, and make it a favorite. So it's a lot easier that way. Okay? So just know that you'll have all this information available to you. So when we look at the scientific inquiry domain, and I'm referring to the domains of the national standards, which is why I told you that this book, I want you to just think about it and refer to it. Everything we teach in psychology, whether it is intro to psych or AP psych, doesn't matter, these standards really do cover the topics, the units, the concepts that we want our students to know and understand when they leave our room at the end of the semester, the end of the year, so that they will better understand that psychology is a science, and here's how it became a science, and these are the things that psychological scientists study in their research, and this is how it applies to you in your world. So when we developed the document of the standards many years ago, the first document that was put out, teachers came together, high school psychology teachers as well as college professors, and they came up with this document to try to provide for you a content and a curriculum guide, which psychology teachers did not have. How many of you have a content or curriculum guide given to you when you go to teach psychology? Raise your hand. One. Okay? So this was the beginning of that. And then every 5 years it's been revised. So the second revision just really took place. In 2011 of August, it was approved. And this is the most current document showing the psychology standards that we believe teachers should use as a guide for developing their curriculum. And it's produced by teachers working with the APA. So everything we do in here relates to these standards. And what I've tried to do is divide things up into domains so that you can be more familiar with the standards and also see how what we're doing relates to different topics. There's actually, and I'll show it to you later, but when you look through these standards, it's a lot of words, a lot of pages to read. But this one page is really helpful just to refer to generally speaking, and that is on page 3. And it's a diagram that shows you how the different domains and standards relate. And we like to think of it this way, because at the very center, what do you see? Science. Science, right? And when you look at the scientific inquiry domain, you see perspectives in psychological science, research methods, measurement, and statistics. And by looking at this graphic organizer and seeing it at the center of everything we teach, it shows you how important it is. that you allow students to learn about how psychology is a science, what psychologists as scientists do. And then from there, everything else fits. And if you look at the way it branches out, you can see the various domains and how they are related, we can talk about later, okay? So starting with the scientific inquiry domain, and the way I think, I related that to many different topics that we teach throughout our courses. And you've already alluded to the fact of how you might want to start with social psychology. And I'll be honest with you, I taught my course for AP psychology and intro to psychology for many years, starting out with research and social psych the first week of school, because it pulled them in and it really helped them learn more about research methods by applying it to those wonderful, interesting, crazy unethical research studies done by the social psychologists. So they were like, within the first week, they're like, this is the coolest subject in the world. I love Milgram, you know. The Confederates, as you said, in the Milgram experiment. So I'm not going to read this to you, but I do want to point out that there are some things that also you would really like to do with your students when you're teaching about research methods throughout the course that always go back to the fact that psychology is a science. When you look at these websites, for example, the Online Psychology Laboratory, how many of you are familiar with that? All right? When you go onto that website, you can have your students participate in research online. And they become researchers. They become the psychologists doing the research on all different topics. How many of you are familiar with PsychSim? Sometimes it comes with textbooks, and sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to see if we're lucky here, real quick. See if this works. Yeah, this is called PsychSim 5. Okay, and even though it is published by Worth Publishers, this is an online edition. Any of you can get to it. So that's why I want you to have these things to be able to just click on them and open them up. Look at the research studies and discussions and activities that your students can participate in here. And many of these are interactive activities, and some of them are little research studies that they can use in all different topics. So, you know, we want active learning in the classroom. We want our students to be able to participate in activities that allow them to understand better the concepts. So these interactive links and sites and actual online research laboratories are really something you want to try to work into your classroom. Even if you only get to do it once a week or once every 2 weeks, that active participation is absolutely essential to learning about psychology. And it's what makes our class fun. Active learning makes psychology what it is. So I just wanted to show you how you're going to be able to open up these things and check them all out on your own. As far as the sociocultural domain, which is how we word it in the standards, you'll see that. Top left, sociocultural context domain. It includes many of the things that we teach in our social psych chapter in our textbooks. Social interactions and sociocultural diversity. Well, there's a lot of different concepts you can teach, and the standards actually show you some of those concepts, and I'll look at them later with you. But here are some great links to research methods and other activities that you can use in your classroom. And you can use them week 1, or you can use them when you talk about social psychology at the end of the school year. It doesn't matter where you use them. The Social Psychology Network is phenomenal. I mean, it's social psychology at its best. How many of you have used it? It has references and research and methodology activities and articles, and of course, the infamous prison experiment is logged there, the original Stanford Prison Experiment website. And I always have my students actually go through every single one of these slides where it tells you the history of the prison experiment. They show little video clips of the original prisoners in the experiment. And there are all kinds of critical thinking questions they can do at the end of this. And this is why I love research methods. Because here's a great research study that you now can take apart with your students and talk about the methodology and the issues that developed and why they developed and why Zimbardo did what he did and why he didn't do what he should have done. And to hear him talk about it in itself is amazing. But I mean, to hear all these things and read all these things and then the class discusses them, you've got basically online cooperative learning, discussion prompts, critical thinking. You've got all the really good strategies that you want to utilize in your classroom, all wrapped up in this sort of a WebQuest activity when you think about it. So, I mean, that's available to anyone online. So that's one I highly recommend that you use when you're doing both research methods as well as social psych. Okay? And by the way, there are a lot of social psych documentaries that you might want to include in your classroom that relate to research, and these are just a few of them here, and they all open up regular documentaries, okay? This is one that I discovered a couple years ago when I was using it in sociology class. Now, you could use this in sociology, history, psychology. It's fantastic. And the reason I found it was because a girl that I've been working with on another project actually helped to develop this. And it's from the American Anthropological Association, where'd it go? And it's called Race, Are We Really So Different? And this is the website. It's an interactive, it won't work? Hold on, let me see. If it doesn't work, that's okay.
This is the last
Clip.
No, the last slash is.
Messing it up? We gotta get rid of that. It's an interactive website. And what happens is when you open this up, you will be able to look at a number of different articles about the history of race. And you'll be able to see,
It is opening, I just think it's behind, if you look down at the toolbar in the bottom, you got a bunch of windows that look open. Click on that circle, to the left one more, yeah.
sorry. You'll see that this has a lot of really neat history, research studies. It has topics about human variation, individual differences, and lived experience is the one that I really tell all the teachers that they absolutely have to use. You all remember the very, very famous experiment done by Mr. Clark? Who remembers? What was it all about? Go ahead.
Just the dolls showing mostly African American girls, boys with dolls, how they selected and how we internalized.
Right. This study was done way back when a very famous court case was taking place. Do you remember the court case? Love history teachers. Okay? And because of this study, it helped to bring about the understanding that separate is not equal. And so the very, very, very famous study that was done was recreated by a teenage student in high school only a few years ago. And I have the article for you so that you can see what she did. And her video that she developed is here on this website. And she talks about how she recreated this experiment.
Every black female has a big butt and big boobs.
Loud, obnoxious, ghetto.
Light skin being more attractive than dark skin.
We're not smart. We're this way, we're that way. And a lot of times we have to prove ourselves as not being true.
At a young age, I already knew the standards for a girl like me. As I become older, they become more obvious.
You have to have permed hair, relaxed hair.
You know, straight hair or like blonde hair, you know, long waves or something.
And if it's natural, that's good hair. Like bad hair is hair you have to relax because it's kinky.
Like it's not like appealing to have like natural hairstyles, or like if they are natural, they have to be like the curly head like black girls or something that looks mixed or something.
And I remember when I first started wearing my hair natural, at first my mom was okay with it and she thought it looked nice. And then after like the second day, she was like, oh, stop that. She was like, you're starting to look African. I was like, well, I am African. And that really pissed me off.
There are standards that are imposed upon us, like, you know, you're prettier if you're light-skinned.
I knew people in the past that just wanted to be light-skinned, not for any particular reason, you know, because they love themselves. I mean, they love themselves except for, you know, the color of their skin.
Like my siblings are all lighter than me, and my mom, she's dark-skinned, but she's lighter than me. So like I noticed, and I was like, hey, how come I'm the darkest, and you know everybody else is so light? And I don't know. Since I was younger, I also considered being lighter as a form of beauty, or you know, beautiful than being dark skinned. So I used to think of myself as being ugly because I was dark skinned.
I knew people who actually like went out there and got, bleaching cream and everything. They actually like laid in the tub, poured capfuls of bleach into it just so they could see if their skin would get lighter.
But yeah, my aunt that lives in Honduras, she basically started using skin bleaching cream when she was about 25, and she started her oldest daughter on it when she was about 11, and then she has an even younger daughter that was about 6 when she started using the skin bleaching cream on her.
I've seen people say that I would never marry a dark-skinned man because I don't want that in my gene pool.
I guess I sort of felt like there was not any attention towards me because of maybe my skin color or because my hair was kinky or, just basically that. Or even when I was younger, say there was I don't know, a doll. I used to have a lot of dolls, but most of them were just white dolls with long straight hair that I would comb, and I would be like, oh, I wish I was just like this Barbie doll.
In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with black children. He asked them to choose between a black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you like best or that you'd like to play with?
This one. I like that one.
Show me.
Okay.
This one.
That one?
This one. I like to play with this.
And can you show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll?
He's white.
And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And can you and why does that look bad?
Because it's black.
And why do you think that's a nice doll?
Because she's white.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you?
"15 out of the 21 children preferred the white doll.
Our ancestors came to this country and they were pretty much ripped out of their culture. They couldn't speak their language. They couldn't, they couldn't be themselves. They had to be like what everybody else told them to be.
When you don't know where you're from and you don't know what country you're from, all you know is basically you're from Africa, that's all you're given, I feel like it brings on a lot of ignorance and it builds a lot of anger. I've seen it build a lot of anger in a lot of black young females. I don't know, they feel like because they feel like they have a right to disown any kind of African roots.
I think for a black girl in general, it's like you're missing a piece of you, And for me, yeah, it's like, oh, I don't have any actual heritage, not heritage, but culture. I know I'm from Africa, but the different countries in Africa have their different cultures, their different morals, their different values, and not knowing that it sort of keeps us at a loss, and I feel like we're busy searching for it while everybody else in society is throwing their ideas and what they believe we should be at us. But personally, we know that's not what we should be, but we're gonna take it because we don't know exactly what it is that we should be because we don't really know where we came from.
I wish I could tie you up in my shoes, make you feel unpretty too. I was told I was beautiful, but what does that mean to you? Look into the mirror, who's inside there? The one with the long hair. Same old me again today. My outside's not cool, my inside's a blow. Every time I
used in your classroom and how it actually can go across a number of different domains and concepts that you teach, correct? In your classroom. So besides social psych, where might you use it?
History.
In history?
History, civil rights movement.
Absolutely, both in your history classes as well as history and psychology and the importance of, you know, the way in which psychology has developed and individuals have become involved in psychology, which, by the way, while you were talking about, what's his name, that had the first PhD? Sumner. Well, Kenneth Clark went to attended Howard University, and after Sumner got his PhD, Kenneth Clark then went on to Columbia. So he had the first PhD from Columbia, and his wife, a woman, had the second. Black Americans. So I mean, this is what's so important. When you look at the history of psychology and how it developed, and the issues of the day and how that even affected individual research, it's something that I think we want to bring into our classrooms. So you just got a taste of that, but there's a lot of ways that you can use it. So I love that.
CNN created it too. CNN has a huge site as well that has that you can access.
Yes, yes. And the students really, in 7 minutes, I mean, that 7 or 10 minute clip of that young lady's research, which again, is a student that recreated research. You can talk a lot about methodology there as well. What was good about it, maybe what were some problems with her little study. I really believe the students remember and learn so much better from using that example than me just talking about it and writing on the board of notes and things like that. You know what I'm saying? So I would utilize it big time. Also, there are a number of different blogs and wikis that people have created online that I believe are useful to you. And there's one that I highly recommend that has all these research studies. So for child psych as well as social psych, this particular blog that I put on here, they have like the 10 most interesting research studies that were ever done in social psychology. And what I would recommend is you have your students read them. And you have your students summarize them and discuss them in small groups. You can have lip circles where the students sit down and discuss the various experiments and the various research studies. And even though, you know, you're going to learn about it from your textbook, they're actually going to be able to learn a lot more by reading it, discussing it, and maybe even presenting it to each other in the classroom so that they're teaching more about it than you just teaching it. And so this website, I will highly recommend, called SciBlog. And this is where I also have clicked on it later on, which I'll even refer to in my other presentation later on, the 10 most crucial child developmental studies. So, I mean, if you want to look at, you know, developmental psychology and the research that was done on the child studies, they're all here. Infant memory, when the self emerges, you know, the me in the mirror with the rouge, you know, how children learn that the earth isn't flat, the strange situation, which is phenomenal, Ainsworth's research, and you can have the students watch original footage of her doing the studies, and there's a little worksheet I have that I have my students observe the children and write things about the children and what they do and then discuss it. So they really get a sense of what research is all about and how it's really the center of all psychology. So I guess what I'm saying is I would really like to see incorporating research studies into our whole year. Not just the beginning of the year, not just a 1 week session on here's how you do research, and this is what a variable is, and, you know, make it known to the students that everything you're teaching them is based on research that's been done. And now, you know, you can study it in a much more critical manner. And they'll understand it so much better by the end of the year. They'll be able to tell you everything you want them to know about research design and variables and confounding variables and control factors. And, you know, what are quantitative studies, what are qualitative studies. They're going to be really versed in research. And you're going to be very proud of them. So there are many others on here that I'm not going to show you, but I will provide it for you, like I said, online, so that you can utilize it. Okay? Now, one other little quick thing. How much time do I have? About 10 minutes?
So you can send us a copy of these?
Yes, you will have these either online, or if you want an email copy of it, I'll be glad to give it to you. You can,
Yes,
I'll get them all from you, no problem. No problem. Absolutely. The other thing I'd like to bring about here is that because we're all involved in curriculum and we're all involved in trying to help our students to really understand psychology, I don't know how many of you are aware of UBD, how many of you use Understanding by Design in your school districts? These Understanding by Design is a way to develop content and curriculum, and it's unit planning. And there are a couple of things that I think apply whether you use Understanding by Design or not to us teaching psychology, and that is what are essential questions that we really want our students to be able to answer? And what are the enduring understandings that we would like them to walk away with when they leave our room? So that we're not just teaching for today in the classroom, but 10 years from now, when they're at a party somewhere, they're going to say, wow, remember when we watched that video in class and they start talking to somebody about what they learned, and they really got the essence of what we wanted them to learn. So again, this will all be available to you, all right? So I think to myself, when I plan a lesson, I look at the standards and I say to myself, what do we want our students to understand and be able to do? And with any topic, history, you have standards, right? You have to look at those standards and say, okay, these are the units, and these are the concepts, and these are the individual objectives, and now I'm going to teach the lesson, this is how I'm going to teach it, and how am I going to assess them? We have all these questions to answer, right? And again, this, I believe, is really a guideline to being able to do that, making it so much easier for you. When you're thinking about enduring understandings, you're thinking about these things. What are the conclusions that students are going to make? What are the generalizations they're going to make? How's it cross disciplines? We all see that in psychology every day. And how am I going to teach them? How are the students going to discuss it? So we like to think about when we relate these things to the standards, we say to ourselves, the students will understand that, and then we think of our course and we think of our unit and say, the students will understand that. Research is the basis of all psychological science, right? Isn't that an enduring understanding? It's that simple. Research is the basis of all psychological science. So I put some tips on here for you as far as how to develop essential questions. It's really not that difficult. And by the way, this is from the work of Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins, which you can also look up online and get a lot of really good stuff. I took these slides from the presentations that they did for our school district. Because they actually came to our school district where we developed Understanding by Design about 5 years ago. Essential questions. Think about the questions that you want your students to be able to answer and how, this is what I can drive students crazy in psychology. There's not always like a right answer. Wait a minute, what's the right answer? Like, there is one. And they're like, no, I can't handle this. But that's so true in psychology, and that's what I like about it. So, there's more than one answer to these essential questions. They cannot always be answered in a single sentence, right? And many times the questions are answered with more questions. We have to raise other important questions and help the students to understand how these things apply beyond, again, the classroom. So when you're developing essential questions for your students and thinking about designing these for your lessons, they kind of guide you in designing your daily lessons. They guide you in designing your units, your objectives, your activities, and your assessments. You know how things are supposed to align? Your objectives, your activities, your assessments, they align. And of course, there's the whole concept of backward design that goes with this too, that we don't have time to talk about, but how many have heard of that? So, when you think about how you're going to plan your lessons, I really think you need to look at this and say to yourself, here are the standards. And believe me, they're really clear and they're excellent. And you can get these online at the APA website. When you go online, all right, the standards has their own link. You can open them up online and you can look at them all, or you can look at them here. You all have a copy of it. What I think is a really excellent guideline for understanding psychology, besides this bullseye, is that there are a lot of themes, a lot of ideas that cross all the areas of psychology. And when it comes to enduring understandings, to me, these overarching themes are really a good example of that. And they're actually on page 1 of the document in this little tiny book marked here. You can't see them here. But right here, you can see these themes that are supposed to go through the whole discipline of psychology. Those are the best place to start for enduring understandings. And you can see how these relate to many different topics. They don't just relate to one area, one unit. So it's really easy to get started there. And then, you remember the little letter that you guys got in the mail? that said we would love for you to help us develop some ideas on performance indicators. Did anybody do their homework? Okay. Well, we're going to talk about these in the next couple of days, and hopefully you'll contribute some, because we really would like you to begin contributing some of these so that we can put them online for other teachers. We made the document up without them for a number of different reasons, but they're essential to the assessment part of our lessons. You follow me? So here's an example of the content standard related to perspectives in psychological science. Those are the two content standards in the document. The performance standard is development of psychology as an empirical science. And then there's others listed here, these performance standards that relate to that, okay? If we want our students to know how psychology evolved as a scientific discipline, and we do, and we look at these standards that are outlined in the document, then how are you going to tell if your students accomplished that? So I just wrote these. They're not in the document, they're not anything formal, but these are two samples I came up with. Explain how William Wundt's research became the basis of experimental psychology and influenced others to research human behavior. You talk about that in your class, don't you? I think most of us want our students to be able to see that, understand that how important Wilhelm Wundt was, how he influenced James, how that really started this whole experimental psychology area of study. Or here's another one that relates specifically, okay, to a performance standard. Explain how psychology evolved as a scientific discipline. I really do enjoy looking at the history of psychology. And I actually use one of the PsychSim activities where they can trace the history of psychology, and it shows you all the important people, and on a timeline you go through it. The kids can do that on their own, or you can use it in the classroom, so it's on that PsychSim link. So I wrote, trace the accomplishments of psychological scientists of the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. That's an assessment. That's a way that we can see, as teachers, what they know. So those performance indicators help me, when I'm developing my lessons, figure out my specific objectives and where I want them to go with those objectives. So that was just a little example of how these standards are really essential and very helpful to you in developing your curriculum. And so if you have any ideas that relate to the different content standards, which we asked you to try to come up with, we're going to talk about them later on, and maybe even we might only be able to have time to do them at our little nighttime discussions. But one of the other things we would like to do is maybe collect your ideas. And remember, it's a draft. It's nothing formal. Collect your ideas, and we can brainstorm over them and develop a list of the ideas that we come up with in this workshop.